A good reason, particularly in philosophical and analytical contexts, often aims to be conceptually complete by providing a comprehensive, foundational justification that leaves no pertinent, underlying questions unanswered. Key aspects of conceptually complete reasons include foundation of rationality. A good reason is generally understood as an objective, mind-independent explanation that follows the laws of thought. The principle of sufficient reason, PSR. This principle argues that every contingency must have a complete explanation, a sufficient reason. A fully complete reason would address every single thing needed for an effect to occur. Conceptual containment. In Leibniz's framework, a complete reason is often found internally within the concept of the subject itself. For example, the nature of a thing determines its properties, providing a logical, analytical, and sufficient explanation, preventing infinite regress. A complete reason serves to stop the endless chain of why questions, Munchausen's trilemma, by resting on a solid, foundational fact. Contextual necessity. While ideal, complete often means sufficient for a given purpose, particularly in conceptual engineering where reasons help structure understanding and action. In contrast, an incomplete reason might be ad hoc, addressing only part of a problem and failing to provide the elegance or structural understanding required. Example of a useless reason versus a good reason. 1. Useless reason. Claim. We shouldn't build the bridge because I just don't like it. Why it's useless. Subjective preference only. It provides no mind-independent justification, no conceptual containment. Nothing about the concept of a bridge, engineering, cost, or risk is referenced, fails PSR. It doesn't explain why the dislike should matter or what it explains, no rational foundation. It doesn't track any principle that could generalize to other cases, no stopping point. If asked why don't you like it, the answer collapses into arbitrariness or regress. This is the kind of reason that cannot support action, policy, or philosophical argument because it explains nothing beyond a personal whim. Good, conceptually complete reason. Claim. We shouldn't build the bridge because the soil composition at the proposed site cannot support the required load-bearing capacity, and any attempt to reinforce it would exceed the project's budget and safety thresholds. Why it's good. Foundation of rationality. It appeals to objective engineering constraints, not personal taste, PSR satisfied. It explains why the bridge cannot be safely built, soil composition, load bearing limits, cost of reinforcement, safety thresholds. Each element is part of the sufficient reason. Conceptual containment. The explanation is grounded in the concepts of structural integrity, engineering feasibility, and safety standards. These concepts analytically entail the conclusion, prevents regress. If someone asks why would the bridge fail, the answer is already contained in the explanation. The chain of why terminates in physical and economic constraints, contextually necessary, for the purpose of deciding whether to build the bridge. This reason is complete enough to justify action. This is the kind of reason that structures understanding, generalizes, and guides action. Example. Nihilistic skeptic versus someone giving a useless reason. 1. The nihilistic skeptic, not debate capable. Interlocutor. Nothing has a reason. Explanations don't actually explain anything. Logic is just a human invention. Evidence doesn't prove anything. So your argument can't possibly be justified. Why this is nihilistic skepticism? They are denying the very standards that make reasoning possible. They reject logic, evidence, and explanation as categories. They undermine the possibility of justification itself. They cannot, even in principle, accept any reason you give, because they rejected the framework in which reasons operate. This is not someone giving a bad reason. This is someone rejecting the possibility of reasons. Result. Debate is impossible because they've dissolved the shared ground on which debate stands. The person who is given a useless reason, debate capable. Interlocutor. I don't think your argument works because it just feels wrong to me. Why this is merely a useless reason. They accept that reasons matter, they accept that logic and evidence are valid. They simply offered a poor, incomplete, or subjective justification. They can revise their reason when challenged. If you ask, can you explain why it feels wrong? They might say, well, maybe it's because I'm assuming X. Let me think. This person is still inside the game of giving reasons. They just started with a weak one. Result. Debate is possible. They can improve their justification. The key distinction. A nihilistic skeptic attacks the possibility of reasons. A person giving a useless reason merely gives a bad reason. One destroys the playing field. The other just makes a weak move on it. Here's a clear example of how someone can systematically discover the grounding relations behind their motivations so they can ensure they are acting on good reasons rather than impulses, vibes, or inherited assumptions. I'll give you a worked example, then a generalizable method you can use for any domain. Example. Systematically uncovering the grounding behind a motivation. Scenario. You feel a strong motivation to reject a job offer because it just feels wrong. At first glance, this is not a reason, it's a signal. Now we systematically unpack it. Step 1. Identify the surface motivation. Motivation. I don't want to take this job. It feels wrong. This is not yet a reason. It's a psychological state. Step 2. Ask, What is the motivation tracking? You interrogate the feeling, what does wrong refer to? What is the feeling responding to? What would have to be true for this feeling to make sense? You discover, you felt anxious during the interview. You noticed the team seemed disorganized. You felt pressured by the recruiter. These are clues, not yet reasons. Step 3. Extract the candidate reasons. Now you translate the psychological data into propositional content. 1. The team appears disorganized too. The recruiter used high-pressure tactics. 3. The role expectations were unclear. These are now candidate reasons. They can be evaluated. Step 4. Test each candidate reason for grounding. You ask, does this reason appeal to objective features of the situation? Does it satisfy the principle of sufficient reason for the decision? Does it generalize? Does it stop regress? Testing. 1. Team disorganization, objective? Yes. Generalizable? Yes. Disorganized teams often cause burnout, sufficient? Potentially. 2. High pressure recruiter, objective? Yes. Generalizable? Yes. Pressure often signals misalignment, sufficient? Not alone. 3. Unclear expectations, objective? Yes. Generalizable? Yes. Sufficient? Yes. Unclear expectations undermine success. Step 5. Identify the grounding relation. You now ask, what deeper principle makes these reasons good? You discover, a job is only rational to accept if the role is clear enough to evaluate success. A team structure is a predictor of your future workload and stress. High pressure tactics often indicate misaligned incentives. These principles are conceptually grounded in, predictive reliability, organizational psychology, norms of informed consent, risk minimization. Now your motivations are connected to stable, rational principles. Step 6. Produce the good reason. You can now articulate a conceptually complete reason. I'm declining the job because the role lacks clear expectations, the team structure appears unstable, and the recruiter's pressure suggests misaligned incentives. These factors jointly undermine my ability to evaluate success and predict future working conditions. This is a good reason because, it is objective, it is generalizable, it satisfies PSR, it contains the explanation within the concepts involved, it stops regress at stable principles of rational decision making. Compass. The generalizable method, you can use this anywhere. 1. Start with the motivation. What am I feeling or wanting? 2. Identify what the motivation is tracking. What features of the world is this responding to? 3. Translate those features into candidate reasons. What propositions could explain this? 4. Evaluate each candidate reason. Is it objective? Does it generalize? Does it satisfy PSR? Does it stop regress? Is it conceptually contained in the situation? 5. Identify the grounding relation. What deeper principle makes this a good reason? 6. Articulate the final reason. A reason that is sufficient, conceptually grounded, and action guiding. Here's a moral decision version of the same systematic process, showing how someone can uncover the grounding relations behind their moral motivations, so they can ensure they're acting on good reasons, not vibes, guilt, or inherited norms. I'll give you a worked example, then a generalizable method you can use for any moral case. Example: systematically grounding a moral motivation. Scenario: you feel a strong motivation to intervene when you see a coworker being verbally humiliated by a manager. Your initial thought is, I should step in. This feels wrong. That's a moral impulse, not yet a moral reason. Now we unpack it. Step 1. Identify the surface moral motivation. Motivation: I feel compelled to intervene. This is a moral signal, not a justification. Step 2. Ask, what is this moral motivation tracking? You interrogate the feeling, what exactly feels wrong? What feature of the situation is my moral sense responding to? What would have to be true for this feeling to make sense? You notice, the manager is using humiliation as a tool. The coworker looks distressed and powerless. Others are watching silently. You feel a sense of injustice and responsibility. These are moral data points. Step 3. Translate the data into candidate moral reasons. You convert the raw moral perception into propositional content. 1. Humiliating someone violates their dignity. 2. The coworker is in a vulnerable position. 3. Allowing public humiliation normalizes abuse. 4. I am in a position to help. These are now candidate moral reasons. Step 4. Test each candidate reason for grounding. You evaluate them. 1. Violating dignity, objective moral principle. Yes. Generalizable? Yes. Sufficient? Strongly. 2. Vulnerability, tracks a morally relevant feature. Yes. Generalizable? Yes. Sufficient? Contributes. 3. Normalizing abuse, tracks systemic consequences. Yes. Generalizable? Yes. Sufficient? Yes. In many frameworks. 4. Ability to help, moral relevance. Yes. Capacity principle, sufficient? Only when combined with others. Step 5. Identify the grounding relations. Now you ask, what deeper moral principles make these reasons good? You uncover, respect for persons, Kantian dignity, minimizing preventable harm, consequentialist grounding, responsibility proportional to capacity, capability ethics, norm-setting effects of public actions, virtue, and social ethics. These principles are stable, generalizable, and conceptually contained in the situation. They explain why the candidate reasons matter. Step 6. Produce the good moral reason. You can now articulate a conceptually grounded moral justification. I should intervene because public humiliation violates the co-worker's dignity, reinforces abusive norms, and I am in a position to prevent harm. These factors jointly create a moral obligation grounded in respect for persons, harm prevention, and responsibility proportional to capacity. This is a good moral reason because, it appeals to objective moral features, it satisfies a sufficient explanation, PSR applied to moral context, it generalizes across cases, it stops regress at stable moral principles, it is action guiding. Compass. Generalizable method for moral decisions. 1. Start with the moral impulse. What am I feeling compelled to do? 2. Identify what the impulse is tracking. What moral features of the situation triggered this? 3. Translate those features into candidate reasons. What propositions could justify this impulse? 4. Evaluate each reason. Does it track a morally relevant feature? Does it generalize? Does it satisfy PSR for moral explanation? Does it stop regress at stable principles? Is it conceptually contained in the moral concepts involved? 5. Identify the grounding relations. What deeper moral principles make these reasons good? 6. Articulate the final moral reason. A reason that is sufficient, grounded, and action guiding. In the end, the work of moral reasoning is not about silencing our impulses, but about understanding them, tracing each motivation back to the principles that give it weight. When we uncover the grounding relations behind our moral reactions, we move from instinct to insight, from raw feeling to justified action. This is how we ensure that our choices are not accidents of emotion or habit, but expressions of stable, defensible reasons. And once we can see the architecture beneath the motivations, we gain something rare, the ability to act with clarity, integrity, and confidence, knowing not just what we should do, but why the action is worthy of us. Here's a clean, structured list of 20 moral principles with supporting philosophers. 1. Non-harm, non-maleficence. Supported by Hippocratic tradition, W.D. Ross, Peter Singer core idea. Avoid causing unnecessary harm. 2. Beneficence. Supported by John Stuart Mill, Peter Singer, Martha Nussbaum core idea. Promote well-being when you can. 3. Respect for autonomy. Supported by Immanuel Kant, Christine Korsgaard, and Nora O'Neill core idea. Treat persons as self-governing agents. 4. Justice fairness. Supported by Aristotle, John Rawls, Amartya Sen core idea. Treat like cases alike, distribute fairly. 5. Human dignity. Supported by Kant, Ronald Dworkin, Charles Taylor core idea. Persons have inherent worth. 6. Honesty truthfulness. Supported by Kant, Cicely Bock, Confucian ethics core idea. Truth-telling is a moral duty. 7. Fidelity promise-keeping. Supported by W.D. Ross, T.M. Scanlon core idea. Honor commitments and trust-based obligations. 8. Responsibility, accountability. Supported by Aristotle virtue, Bernard Williams, Susan Wolfe core idea. Own the foreseeable consequences of your actions. 9. Proportionality. Supported by Just War theory, Aquinas, consequentialist ethics core idea. Moral costs must match moral aims. 10. Reciprocity, golden rule reversibility. Supported by Confucius, Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, Kant, CI Formulation 3, core idea. Treat others as you could rationally accept being treated. 11. Stewardship, care for resources environment. Supported by Aldo Leopold, Hans Jonas, Environmental Virtue Ethics core idea. Care for what is entrusted to you. 12. Compassion. Supported by Buddhist ethics, David Hume, Nell Noddings, Care ethics, core idea. Respond to suffering with empathy and help. 13. Fair opportunity. Supported by Rules, Fair Equality of Opportunity, Sen and Nussbaum capabilities core idea. Ensure equitable access to chances and resources. 14. Consent. Supported by Kant, Autonomy, Mill, Liberty, Contemporary Bioethics, Beecham and Childress core idea. Engage others only with their voluntary agreement. 15. Non-exploitation. Supported by Marx, Kant, Feminist Ethics, Martha Nussbaum, Eva Kitte, core idea. Do not use people merely as tools. 16. Moral consistency. Supported by Kant, universalizability, Rawls, reflective equilibrium, core idea. Apply principles uniformly across similar cases. 17. Role-based duty. Supported by Confucian ethics, W.D. Ross, Michael Walzer core idea. Fulfill obligations tied to your social roles. 18. Moral courage. Supported by Aristotle virtue of courage, Hannah Arendt, Vaclav Havel core idea. Do the right thing despite risk or pressure. 19. Repair, restitution making amends. Supported by Jewish ethics, Teshuva, restorative justice theorists, Howard Zehr, Scanlon core idea. Restore what was harmed when possible. 20. Moral humility. Supported by Socrates, Iris Murdoch, Virtue epistemology, Zagzebski, core idea. Recognize the limits of your perspective and remain open to correction.